Thank you, Sammy. Good afternoon and welcome to the Development Control meeting of the 21st of May 2020. I would like to advise that this is the first ever virtual meeting of the Development Control Committee, and today we'll be using Zoom to provide a live stream to members of the public. Please can we ask that you bear with us as we are dealing with numerous internet connections and sometimes this can cause a slight delay.
Sammy, we can't hear you.
No.
Apologies, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yep.
Yeah, apologies for that. So thank you, Chairman. I can confirm that today we have Councillor Graham Carpenter acting as substitute for Councillor Lawn and Councillor Camden acting as substitute for Councillor Hammond. Sammy Wintle will be your Zoom host for today and Dean Mims will be the officer presenting during the meeting. Matt Seven and Adam Yardley are here to offer IT support if required, and Sammy Wintle will be clerking the meeting today. During the meeting, all participants except for the chairman will be muted, and this should remain during the whole of the meeting unless you have asked to speak. May I take this opportunity to remind members that all members are invited to participate in the meeting, but would ask that you use the raise hand button, which can be found at the bottom of the participant screen, should you wish to speak on any matter. The chairman will be notified of your request and he will then invite you to speak. Once you have been called to speak, please could we ask you to unmute yourself and then once spoken, mute yourself again. Anyone who has telephoned into the meeting will be invited to speak after all those that have raised their hands have spoken. When asking a question, please could we ask members to refer to page numbers within the report or agenda for ease to officers. If we have to adjourn the meeting, the chairman will advise of this and the anticipated length of adjournment. When voting on an application, this will be taken by roll call of those members present. Once your name is called, please unmute yourself and respond accordingly. When confirming the minutes and noting delegated and appeal decisions, unless any member raises an objection on these matters, these will be confirmed by assent. Members may only partake in voting on an application if they have been present for the entire discussion on the application. Thank you, Chair. If we could now undertake a roll call of members present, I will call you out by name if you could just say present. Thank you. Councillor Annison.
Present.
Councillor Bird.
Present.
Councillor Camden.
Present.
Councillor Carpenter.
Present.
Councillor Fairhead.
Present.
Councillor Freeman.
Present.
Councillor Flaxman-Taylor.
Present.
Councillor Mogford.
Big silence. Present.
Thank you. Councillor Myers.
Present.
Councillor Wainwright.
Present.
Councillor Williamson.
Present.
And Councillor Tony Wright.
Present.
Chairman, I can confirm that the officers we have present in the meeting today are Caroline Watling, Monitoring Officer, Jean Mims, Planning Officer, and David Gleason, Development Director, and myself, Sammy Wintle, Corporate Services Manager. Chairman, we can now move on to the agenda items. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. So we move to item number 1, apologies for absence, please.
Chairman, I can confirm that I have apologies for absence from Councillor Hammond, Lawn, and Barbara Wright. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. We now move to item number 2, declarations of interest. Obviously, all the councillors will have an interest in item 5. Are there any others apart from those, please?
Chairman, I can confirm I have no hands raised.
Thank you, Sammy. So we move to item number 3, the minutes, to confirm the minutes of the meeting held on the 11th of March 2020, pages 3 to 8. Everybody happy with those minutes?
Chairman, I can confirm that I have no hands raised, so no objections to the minutes, so those can be taken on assent. So they are confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. So we move to item number 4, which is the application for Tower Road, land north of Flegborough, pages 9 to 26 of your agenda. And at this point, I will hand you over to Dean Minns, the planning manager.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just bear with me a moment. Sammy, you've disabled my screen sharing. Can you hear me, Sammy?
I can hear you, but unfortunately it won't give me the ability to change it. So if you could continue just to talk through the application, that would be much appreciated.
Okay.
For the time being, if I can change it during, I will let you know.
Okay, thanks very much. Just a few updates really on top of what you've got. You've got a full report before you there, sort of setting out the details of the application, which, and I'll just read out the description there, which is construction of 33 new mixed dwelling types, including 9 social housing of different units of different types. And this is a full planning application. And the site is at Tower Road, land north of Flegborough. Within your committee report there are pages, on page, towards the end of the report there, on page 26, you've got a site location plan which shows you the context of the site and how it sits actually within the village of Flegborough.
Officer, I can confirm you can now share your screen.
Okay, thanks very much. Slideshow. Can you see those? Can you see the drawings on the plan on the screen?
Yes.
Yeah.
We can.
Yep.
Okay. Right, hopefully you now see the application number on the site and screen and now before you. Can we see that?
We can.
Yep.
Good, thank you. The application site is outlined in red there, and as you can see, it's approximately 3.1 hectares in area. And just to put it in the context, members, we recently had a site visit up to New Road or New House in Flegborough, and that site was just to the north of where the application site is, just in this area here. At the same time, we parked up on this road, we came along here, and you could then see sort of new developments sort of taking place in here, which is then mentioned actually within the committee reports. The access to the site is this Tower Road that runs along here as well. And for the length of the site at Tower Road, the site frontage is 30 miles an hour. We just get to this point here, and it then turns into sort of 60 miles an hour just at this point here, and then leading back up to sort of the main road at Filby. I mention this because about the speed limit there, because someone has pointed out there is an error within my report. 724, where it actually talks about the whole of Tower Road as being 30 mile an hour. But hopefully that then sort of corrects that point. You can also see from this aerial photograph the existing sort of pattern of development around the area of Flegborough. And again, this is sort of, I refer to the sort of mix within the report. You've got a sort of mixed use or mixed style of development around here with sort of bungalows, houses. The doctor's surgery as well is actually over this point here, I believe it is, on the site. And again, this is the bygone village over here, which again has been sort of, which has been built over the last sort of 15 years or more. Just moving along.
Dean, are you indicating things on the screen?
I am. Can you see that?
Can't. Oh, I can see it now. I can't see it. Couldn't see it on the previous one.
Right. If I use a laser pen, can you see that moving about now?
Yep. Fine, thank you, Dean.
Okay, good, thank you. So again, we've got the, this is the sites I've outlined in black there. You can see that as I take you through the site and the photographs, you'll see that there's a property, one property at the rear here, and we've had a sort of a letter of concern raised about them, about the proximity of the dwelling at the rear of the boundary there, and sort of overlooking there and overshadowing their land. And the new development sort of runs around here, as I said earlier there, just sort of taking you forward again. So just looking across, so off to this side here, you've got sort of Tower Road runs along there. The site that we're looking at is just in here. The new properties that I mentioned on sort of on Roseley Road will sort of run around here, and you can sort of, they were granted consent 3 years ago, and you can see that they are still under construction, but certainly these earlier ones here are fully sort of built out. And I think these 1, 2, 3, I think actually have sold at the moment, and these ones are currently sort of under offer there. Running around again, and then this is looking into the site with Tower Road behind me again. And I mentioned that property at the back of the site, which is just in here. And you can see the site is sort of relatively flat. And at the moment, there's no sort of nothing being sort of grown on there as such. It is grade 1 arable land, but as I say, it hasn't been used for any sort of particular purpose recently there. You've got boundaries, sort of hedge boundaries running around the site. And this tree here is just on the boundary of the site, so it doesn't actually, no development actually impact upon that. And running along the side here is also a footpath number 5, which is referred to in your committee report. If I just go back slightly there, and footpath number 5 runs along here and across there. And then links up to Tretzloke and then sort of disappears down into the Broads Authority area. So just moving back again, just running around. We're now looking at Tower Road is just in the foreground here. The corner of the junction with Roseley Road runs around at this point. You just see the new development there sort of taking place. After the left-hand side, we've then got the established development. We're now looking in the other direction, and this takes us back towards looking towards along Tower Road, back to Filby Main Road again there. And you can just see sort of, I think it's Royden Road off there, just off to the right-hand side. Footpath coming through at this point here as well, linking through to the site. The idea is this then sort of links up down into footpath number 5, that I mentioned earlier, and takes that through the development boundary. And again, this is just looking, with Tower Road behind is looking across at the site again. Just taking around the site again. That one's actually looking back with the, from the site, looking back towards Tower Road. And again, just sort of looking around, showing how sort of flat it is. This area here, I mentioned within the report about the retention basin, and that's basically just where I'm sort of standing at the present time, and this photograph is taken from. This is a plan which is taken from, which is actually within the committee report there, and you can see that on page 25, and that sort of sets out basically the Tower Road frontage. And I'm going to show you another photograph in a moment, just sort of a layout. But this is the layout which is now proposed, and you can see the dwelling types sort of coloured up here and then sort of set out and what type of properties they are within the report. So you've got sort of frontage development running along here, and then in between the two roads opposite, and then we then run into the site. Off to the left-hand side, there'll be this sort of grassed area. Now, this area has sort of shown also sort of a cellular basin to actually sort of take runoff from water off the road as well there. There's also another basin at the back here as well, which is in this area here. Within the report is also mentioned about the pumping station, and again, you'll recall that when we went to look at sort of, we had the site visit at New House, is that we sort of walked down this road here, and then, or we walked around further down there, but also mentioned about the pumping station, which was just on the back here. That then sort of also serves the development of the rear here. So it's a mains sewage that this site will be actually connected to. And the surface water would then actually go into this retention basin over here and then sort of disperse into the ditch and then make its way down through the ditch system. Now, we've had representation from the Broads Management, Broads Drainage Board there, and again, subject to sort of their agreement and crossing their palms with silver, then they're prepared to accept the water runoff from the site into that ditch, but they do require additional details of that to be submitted to them before finally agreeing to that. As I mentioned, we've got the existing sort of property running around there, which we showed you earlier, and I showed you earlier there. In terms of the Nickel House at the back here, there's been a new fence which has been erected along their boundary here, and by the developer, and at his expense, which is sort of 2 metre high, which the applicant, the neighbouring property has agreed to. But they are concerned about this 5-bedroom property being here, and sort of an impacted upon them and sort of overlooking from that property. Now, taking the measurement from the back of this dwelling here to the boundary fence, that sort of measures about 19 metres. Then you've got another 12 to 13 metres at the back there. So it is a reasonable distance between the two properties. But nevertheless, having had an open field here in the past, then with development sort of coming around them and enclosing them in, there is this sort of concern about additional overlooking of their properties and that property. And they've got a big patio door sort of at the back here, which will then potentially they can look directly into there. Now, having spoken with the developer, and this is not mentioned in the report, but updating the report, the developer is saying that if members are minded to approve this application, then he is prepared to actually sort of to look at either putting the bungalow in there or 1.5 story sort of property in there and orienting it, moving it around so that it doesn't, so the additional, any impact upon that property is minimized. So I'll have to ask you to take that into consideration as part of your deliberations in this, to this proposal. So within here, you can see for yourself about this sort of the number of different sort of mix of housing and bungalows in there. I also sort of mentioned in the report about, and you can see in this sort of list here about these terrace properties in here. And this is sort of 1-bedroom properties. Now, the parish council have made comments about those being, so they ought to be 2-bedroom terrace properties there and 2-bedroom houses. In conjunction, the applicant has been discussing this, the layout and the type of properties on there with our housing department. And the housing department are actually happy with the mix and the makeup of this development there, and saying it sort of fits in the type of properties that we actually require, including, and within that they also sort of highlight the social housing as well, which is sort of which is mentioned in this. So 9 properties in all would actually be accommodated on the site, and that more than sort of meets our sort of 20% requirement within the local plan. Just going back to the report again, and I'll just move you around to this, just showing you this. just to give you an idea. This section here, when you looked at the previous slide, you'll see that there has been some alteration since this slide was actually sort of put forward there. But and the drawing was formed part of the planning application. But just to sort of give you a flavour of the type of open space actually within the site itself and the additional planning that they're talking about within this. Now, we talk about it within the report as well about the type of open space on there. Now, the requirement normally is for the council is that we require sort of 40 square metres of open space to be provided. And generally speaking, on site itself there, and it'll be sort of usable open space as well. So further discussion really has to be sort of taken place with the applicant about this open space and its usability there. Bearing in mind also that they've sort of shown that these cellular blocks actually run under the site there as well. There's also, in terms of the open space over here and this sort of retention basin running around here, talk about sort of the county wildlife people would actually like to see that turn into a sort of a wildlife sort of basin area, if you like, sort of going around there and sort of, so it'd be a wildlife enhancement. Again, that sort of fits in with our sort of policies. And then just sort of, as I mentioned earlier about the sort of footpath from Tower Road there. And you can sort of see really the line that it comes through here. We sort of come through from the main road from, as it runs through, this takes you down to Philby there. And it runs here through the whole farm development there, through Roydon Way, and then Tower Road, and then comes down at this point here. There's also a sort of footpath number 5 that comes along here as well, which is sort of mentioned in the report around this area here, which links through there. Some additional enhancement of that is requested by the county infrastructure people as well. In terms of this, this footpath here, I'll just take you back again to this particular slide. You'll then see that as you come on from Tower Road here, there's sort of enhancements to that sort of footpath as well as part of this sort of proposal, which will sort of open this up sort of beyond the metre sort of height taking you through. And you can see the, is annotated on your sort of plan there as well. And then sort of, then runs through right along there and along the side here. So again, there's sort of enhancements of that. Now, one of the things that's sort of holding this up really was the, to make sure that there was free and uninterrupted flow of that sort of footpath along the side there. So you'll see within the report that the footpath officer is now sort of satisfied with that and has got no objection to the proposal, subject to just sort of making sure that it's carried out in accordance with the plan and that we cover that within the Section 106 agreement if members are minded to approve it. Likewise, you can also see on your report as well, sort of down the bottom here, about the sort of the highway improvements as well. And it says on this plan that it's actually sort of to be widened by sort of 6 metres Tower Road. I'll put within the report 5.8 metres there, but certainly this plan says 6 metres as well. There were originally going to be sort of improvements to the junction, but the highway officer then, once they actually sort of looked into the ownership around the junction, they found that it wasn't actually possible to actually improve the junction around there. So he's now satisfied, the highway officer, that with the proposal widening of the Tower Road as proposed, also sort of you've got a couple of bus stops on here. Again, you can sort of see within your report that it's sort of mentioned about enhancing those as well, and one on either side there. At the present time, it's quite difficult to actually see where they are there, but again, making sure that they are visible and sort of able to be used. So just going back to the report again, there was sort of mentioned in there about the numerous sort of various reports that have been put forward on page 10. Just drawing your attention then to sort of the parish council's comments on at paragraph 5 and their comments therein. You can read those for yourself. In terms of the public representations that we've received there's sort of 5 in total there. I've received another one, as I mentioned today, and again sort of mentioned the fact about this sort of not being sort of 30 mile an hour along its entire length there. Also the fact that they're concerned that not enough emphasis in the report has been put on in terms of the actual sort of the objections received to the application, and particularly the concerns raised about the impact upon the local road network there, and they're concerned about sort of highway safety. And so as I say, we've got the comments back from the highway officer, and that he's got no sort of concerns in that regard. And again, looking at really apparent, so this will place further demands upon the local facilities. The proposal is contrary to the current policies in the local plan. Talk about the impact upon the local infrastructure again in there. And one that we've had sort of on the previous development and new house as well, Flegborough cannot cope with the increased development, sort of insufficient demand for further housing. And again, we're sort of within the report, we sort of set out the demand that we have in the area and the need for housing, new housing provision. I mentioned here about the doctor's surgery being open only sort of three days a week as well there. This checking with the surgery there, they're actually open 4.5 days a week with the doctor sort of closed over sort of half day, I believe it was on Tuesday. I've got the opening hours on as part of this report as well, or part of the slideshow. Again, it's about this question of sort of new housing there. And again, this sort of loss of agricultural land, and that we need to sort of grow our own vegetables, etc., and crops in the future there. No jobs to warrant further housing in the area, and we do not need the additional traffic going through the village. Also a comment made about the large dwellings, and locals will not be able to afford them. And the traffic and the roads are too narrow really to accommodate these new developments. So moving along, you've got in the main, you can see for yourself on pages 12 to 13 again there. There's no real objections for any sort of statutory bodies. There is a sort of requirement for additional conditions on there, and to make sure that it is carried out in accordance with the approved plans. This plan here, and apologies, my sort of the overshadowing in the corner, it could even be my thumb, is that we've got, this is the other side of Treads Lake here, Loke, and it comes round. We've also got that pumping station that I showed you earlier on up in the sort of the corner of the site, and this footpath that runs all the way alongside the development boundary there. And this is just where it then connects, and you can just see there that it then sort of connects in here, then takes off again down this sort of this road over here off Treads Loke. Again, this is just sort of a landscaping plan, just sort of showing what's sort of proposed on there. And these are sort of the dwelling types and sort of bungalows. I'll just run through those and you can sort of see them, the materials in there as well. And so we've got a combination of hip roofs and pitch roofs. These are the housing types on the site as well there. And these are sort of a buff bricks and rendered panels in there as well. And I think looking at when you looked at the photographs I showed you earlier there, you can sort of see, I think the developer who's also developing on the adjoining site sort of is showing what a sort of a good standard of building is actually sort of doing on that adjacent site. And these are the one-bedroom sort of terraced houses that run along there as a sort of two associated car parking spaces, offer a common parking area which serves each of those serves those properties as well. And those are the surgery opening now, as I sort of mentioned earlier there as well. And you can see that Tuesday is the afternoon where the doctor is on call and it's not open at that stage. So that's the end of the show, the slides there. Just running back to the report again. I'm just running back to during the actual development itself. And members of the committee have sort of seen a number of these sort of aspects sort of running through in terms of the way that, again, it's sort of set out in the committee reports. And also the local financial considerations that you need to sort of take into account. Again, in this issue, there's none of those to be taken into consideration. Talk about the shadow habitats regulations assessment. Again, there's no objections been raised by county in terms of the wider impact of the individual sort of impact of this proposal itself. But again, on the sort of the local sort of habitat situation in terms of the regulations there as well, there is a cumulative impact, and this will be addressed as part of the Section 106 agreement there. So again, money going for £110 per dwelling towards the sort of the general mitigation package. And we're talking much about within the report at 7.7, there's about the sort of the case of Waverton Properties Limited there, and what members need to take into account when they're sort of looking and deciding these applications, and really the weight that you actually put to the current sort of local plan policies, and in the context again of the sort of lack of a 5-year supply at the moment, deliverable 5-year supply. And just moving on to the recommendation there, the recommendation is to approve the application subject to a 106 agreement, ensuring that we got the social housing, the habitat mitigation measures, and also the improvements to the footpath and local infrastructure. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dean, and thank you for that detailed presentation. Have any members got any technical questions for Dean Minns, please?
Councillor Wright, you can now speak.
Thank you. Yes, Dean, you mentioned the open space that's going to be available. Apparently, there's 2 sections of open space. You mentioned that long, thin strip there.
Yeah.
What is the sort of area? What sort of area are we talking about with that long strip?
That works out about I think it's about sort of 1,400 square meters, which probably it more or less actually fits in what the requirements are. So it's, yeah, 40 times sort of 40 meter, 33 times 40 meters there. So whatever that is, that's sort of
what is the width of that at the narrowest point, roughly?
And I've got it written down here somewhere. It's about 10 meters.
That's about 10 metres. It's a fair piece of land. So, obviously, we don't want to take it over as a local authority, any responsibility there. Is the proposal by Flegborough Parish Council, is that acceptable to the developers, or is it something that we could add if we wanted to? It's
what we'd have to look at first of all is, well, if the developer is actually sort of in agreement with that, then it would be fine. But what we normally look at is, obviously there's an obligation that goes with that as well, and often what we've been doing in the past is actually sort of setting up these management agreements on there. But certainly we can discuss that further with the developer, and if he's willing to do that, then you know, fair enough from that point of view. But it certainly wouldn't be a requirement of this any planning sort of permission that you have here, not sort of necessary to make it sort of function, if you like.
But in any case, the open space would be open to everybody, not just the people within the development?
That's correct, yeah.
That's correct. Okay, thanks.
Chairman, we now have a question from Councillor Bernard Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. I just going back to the open space issue, Dean, please, if you could. Are you saying that the maintenance of open space will be carried out by a management agreement, or will it be carried out by the Borough Council? Because obviously there's quite a bit of open space both along the west side, I think, and also down in the wildlife area at the northeast corner.
Yeah, but I think the basic thing with this really would be that certainly we would prefer a management company as opposed to the council actually taking it on, because where you've actually got sort of drainage forms part of the open space as well in there. Obviously, there's a longer term maintenance sort of problem with that, and potentially sort of problem sort of that could arise in the future.
Is it possible, therefore, to write that into the approval recommendation?
It would be that we're as part of the 106 agreement.
Yeah.
Management.
And may I ask a further question, please, just technically? Are we going to make any comment about the house in the northwest corner, the large house which backs onto the other house? That's going to be changed, orientation, and also possibly to a bungalow?
I would advise it, yes.
Do we include that in the recommendation?
Yes, that's right, yeah.
Thank you. Thanks.
Chairman, we now have a question from Councillor Fairhead.
Thank you. Dean, I just have a couple of concerns about drainage, as I would. On page 14, paragraph 5, 16 and 17. There's a couple of referrals there about, the Broads charging policy, and also that, they propose that a water course, then this would also require land drainage consent in line with Broads bylaws. Is that all being taken into consideration?
It will be, because we need to make sure that all those aspects are actually sort of in place before they actually then start development on the site.
Thank you.
Chairman, we now have a question from Councillor Myers.
Thank you. Just two quick ones. Do we know which properties have been identified for social housing within the development? And with regards to the parish council's request that they remain in perpetuity as social housing, that would seem difficult if they come under legislation for right to buy. So could you sort of clear up those 2 points, please?
In as far as we can, in terms of the 106 agreement, there we have a sort of a cascade effect on all these things, whereby we seek to sort of keep them as in perpetuity for social housing there. But there is always a clause in there which would allow later on that under the right circumstances that it's then sort of, if they are then sold on, that the council then sort of has the right to actually take those properties on, or they're actually sold at a reduced market value in the future. So they do still fit within that sort of affordable housing category, if you like. In terms of the type of properties they are, they have been identified, and I've got a email from Sue Boland there, sort of setting out which properties have been identified to be used as social housing on there. But I'd rather not identify and saying hard and fast that those will be those at the present time, but they have been identified.
May I just have a sort of rough idea, because I don't think it's going to be the 5-bedroom ones, is it?
Plots 1, 11, 4, 6, 13, 16 to 19.
Thank you.
Chairman, I can confirm I have no more questions.
Thank you, Sammy. I now move to invite an agent to speak.
Chairman, I can advise that there are no agents or applicants wishing to speak on this matter.
Thank you. I now move to invite any objectors or interested parties to speak.
Chairman, I can confirm that there are no persons wishing to speak on this matter.
Thank you. So I move to invite parish council representatives or ward councillors to speak. And I understand Adrian Thompson, ward councillor, wishes to speak.
Thank you, Chairman. I will just pass you over to Councillor Thompson. Good afternoon, Councillor Thompson. Can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yep.
Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. So, Councillor
Yep.
Thompson, you now have 5 minutes to speak on the application. If you just bear with me, I will start a timer and I will let you know when you have 30 seconds remaining.
Thank you.
Okay, you're ready to go now. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing us to speak. If this development goes ahead, it has a number of advantages for Flegborough. You've mentioned the piece of land behind the existing 9 houses. Speaking to the developer, they are actually prepared to hand that over to the parish, along with the piece of land in the corner of Town Road, Tar Road, which was part of the condition of the original 9. So that becomes, we would also encourage a management committee to look after it, but comes under the ownership of the parish council. Secondly, the development, as you've heard, offers 9 smaller dwellings, 1 and 2 bedroom houses in Flegborough, which I certainly welcome. We need smaller houses in this part of the world to keep the youngsters here. Obviously, there is some 106 money coming, hopefully, from this development to Flegborough open space and playing field. And I'd just like to clarify this point. When I was last speaking to Gemma, the 106 money is based on the 33 plus the 9 existing. So it comes to 42, because there was no 106 money coming forward on the original 9. Another point I'd like to bring up, which hasn't been mentioned now, is that Norfolk County Council would like to put 2 speed restriction signs outside Flegborough School on the A1064. Now, these are, we understand, are only advisory and only in operation when the school is open. Therefore, we would request, both myself as Borough Councillor and Parish Council, that money, the equivalent money, be put towards a pedestrian crossing, which we are looking to install to benefit the school and the play area. The Parish Council already committed to a £3,000 survey by Norfolk County Council, and we'd like the money for the signs to go towards that as part of this development. There's nothing really, yes, there are loss of land, but we certainly as a borough councillor, providing these conditions are met, I would ask you to approve this plan. Also, the bungalow at the corner, but Councillor Williamson mentioned the house in the corner. I would very much encourage you to replace a 5-bedroom house with a smaller bungalow, to keep the person's view, but also bungalows in this part of the world are much better than a 5-bedroom house. We've got enough 5-bedroom houses there. So with those conditions in place, as a borough councillor, I have no objections.
Thank you, Councillor Thompson. Are there any councillors got any technical questions for the ward councillor, please?
Chairman, I can confirm I have no hands raised.
Okay, thank you. So basically now we move to the debate.
Chairman, I can confirm I've had no hands raised to speak on the debate. Oh, sorry, Chairman, I've now had Councillor Williamson, so I'll pass you over to Councillor Williamson.
Thank you. Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. I'll just picking up Councillor Thompson's comments with regards to the 5-bedroom house. I think it is important in this part of the world to actually deal with this, and I would ask that this is included in the recommendation as we go forward.
Okay, yeah. Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions or anything in the debate?
Chairman, we have a question from Councillor Wright.
Just a query with regard to this development. Once again, we see, and I've raised this on several occasions, a question of grade 1 agricultural land being given over to housing, and I find it's quite disturbing that we're in this position. I'm not obviously opposed to this because obviously we've got our hands tied with the 3.47 years supply of housing. And I think, you know, at some time, I think there's got to be a protection of our agricultural land. Certainly the grade 1 agricultural land being the best agricultural land. And I'm just a bit concerned. I'm not opposing this. I just wanted to make the point again that it seems to be coming up several times now where grade 1 agricultural land is being turned over to housing. I think there's going to become a tipping point when no longer will we have the grade 1 agricultural land within our own area, which will be a great pity.
Okay, thank you. Is there anybody else wish to speak in the debate?
Chairman, I can confirm we're moving on to Councillor Wainwright.
Councillor
Yeah, thank
Wainwright?
you. Just a couple of, I wasn't actually quite sure what Bernard said, whether he wanted to leave the 5-bedroom house there or put a bungalow there. I would be to leave the five bedroom there, to be honest. But just on the Flegborough Parish Council, where they were talking about social housing to be kept as social housing in perpetuity, did I hear Dean say that these could possibly be purchased by the council and used as social housing, or they could be sold at a discounted price? What is the situation with that?
Yeah, Dean Minns.
Yeah. What as part of any Section 106 agreement, there's always a number of sort of scenarios in terms of making sure that we get the affordable housing in there. So one part of it could actually be having sort of discount housing on there, so i.e. it's below the open market price in there, and so that it does sort of then carry on sort of being that falls within the scope of sort of affordability. But certainly any 106 agreement looks to make sure that it is there for the lifetime of the development. Yeah, I mean, have we spoken to our housing people? Because, you know, I'd like for the council to take on these properties. Basically, we're very short of social council properties in the northern parishes, extremely short. And you know, I'm sure that the council under the housing revenue account could probably purchase them. I mean, they're in great demand, and you know, but not, you know, even in that situation, perpetuity doesn't really exist, because obviously there is the right to buy, although it would probably take 15 years before any suitable discounts can come up. But when you talk about discounted prices in Flegborough, nobody could afford anyway. You know, it's a very expensive part of the borough, as we all know. So I would like to move that those, what was it, 6 or 9, we investigate that the council take those on as social housing and run by the council. Can I just add something to that? I've got the comments here from Sue Boland, who's our Enabling and Empty Homes Officer. And I'll just read this out. It says, this site is in the northern rural submarket region and therefore subject to a 20% affordable housing contribution. The adjoining site must be considered with this contribution, and the application addresses this by providing 9 units of affordable housing. These units will need to be secured through a Section 106 agreement should permission be granted. A 10-year split of 90% affordable rent and 10% affordable home ownership would be required, with the preferred option for affordable home ownership being shared ownership. Other options will be considered, but discounted market sale is deterred as it doesn't meet the local housing need. Now, that reminds me basically of the one, and you're picking up on Councillor Wainwright's comment there, and he's absolutely right with that. And it's a good reminder, because certainly when we had some not so far away on the old Bygone Village site, then there was an issue with that in terms of affordability of them, because they were quite sort of high in terms of the even sort of first of all the open market sort of price, and then the discounted price. So he's quite right about that. So that's the preferred option put forward by Sue Boland in there, and that's what would be sort of that's what we're suggesting as part of this Section 106 agreement.
Yeah, thank you, Dave. So could you just say that again, what this Sue Boland said, that not 90% of the 9 will be at affordable rents. Is that what you said?
Yeah.
And that will be written in perpetuity, yeah?
That's part of the agreement that we're looking for, yeah.
So 90% of the 9 will be rented at affordable rents.
Yes, that's right.
That is definitely right. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. And just one other thing, when the parish council say open spaces to be gifted to Flegborough Parish Council, which obviously we heard, I think, Adrian Thompson talk about. I know that they've said that they're going to try and put in a management agreement. But if that doesn't happen, it will then presumably go to the parish council. I hope we wouldn't be considering giving borough council concurrent funding to actually maintain that if the parish council took it on and didn't have a maintenance agreement.
Certainly our preference all the time is that you actually have a management company on who look after it on site there, but at the same time you've got sort of public access to the open space is sort of maintained in. But certainly from the council's point of view, I don't think that we actually would like to sort of have the liability for that, for the reasons I mentioned earlier, because one, if you're having sort of drainage under that, it's also a small area of sort of open space as well. And in terms of sort of logistics of maintenance of that, it's not something that we normally sort of take on. If it was a much larger site, that may be a different matter. But certainly in terms of the small one, the preference is going for the sort of management company looking after it.
Yeah, well, as long as the parish council take it on, they maintain it. All I'm saying is, you know, I've seen these concurrent function grants being doshed out to maintain land that parish councils have got.
No, fair point.
Okay. Is there any other questions or debate, please?
Chairman, I can confirm we've got Councillor Williamson.
Councillor Williamson.
Thank you, Chairman. Just coming back to what Councillor Wainwright said, yes, I was suggesting it was changed. Yeah, the top house.
Okay.
Can I come in there, Chairman, please?
Yeah, Dean, yeah.
I think the situation is with this, whether or not it's a sort of 4-bedroom property or a 5-bedroom property, it's quite a large plot there. It's really something that's is sort of commensurate with the size of the site, but with the size of the plot there. But the main reason in planning terms for actually sort of changing the actual design of it and is about the impact upon the neighbours there rather than the actual type of dwelling itself there, because overall, as you could sort of see also from the housing sort of comments there, this is quite a good mix of properties throughout the site there. So I wouldn't want to get hung up on actually, you know, whether it's a 5-bedroom property or a 4-bedroom property or a 3-bedroom property. I think it's really the impact upon it actually has on the locality, on those neighbouring properties as well, and how it sort of fits in with the area.
Okay. Is that okay, Bernard?
No, I was just taking on board the comment made by Adrian Thompson concerning possibly replacing it with a large bungalow.
Okay.
Chairman, I can confirm we now have Councillor Camden wishing to speak.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just to touch on what Councillor Williamson proposed about changing it to the bungalow, I'm probably in agreement with Councillor Wainwright on this, even though Councillor Thompson mentioned that there's lots of other similar 5-bedroom properties in Flegborough. He also touched on wanting to bring some more young in with this development, and 5-bedroom houses bringing families, which will come with young children or young teenagers. So I believe that comes with the added benefit of the mix of people that this sort of development will encourage. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other debate, please, from any members?
Yes, Chairman, I can confirm Councillor Myers.
Councillor Myers?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just giving consideration again to this 5-bedroom property, there was a willingness expressed by the developer to possibly placate the adjoining property's objections, and they don't seem to have a major issue in changing the design or layout, put it into a bungalow. So with regards to the developer, there doesn't seem to be resistance to that. And if it does placate the neighbouring properties, then perhaps we should go along with that.
Okay, thank you. Any other debate, please?
Councillor Wainwright.
Yeah. Councillor Wainwright?
Yes, yeah. I mean, we get. I do agree with Daniel Camden that basically, we want to attract families as well, and 5-bedroom houses will attract a family, a young family, probably somebody who's obviously relatively well off. But we're getting hung up about this, placating somebody that's 100 feet away. I'm sitting in my lounge, and I'm literally about 15 foot from next door. So this is 100 feet. I mean, you're hardly going to look in their back bedroom from 100 feet unless you've got binoculars. So I would say we leave the 5-bedroom house, and as it is. The developer agreed to change it, but I don't think he would probably really want it to do. And I think the mix as it is good.
Yeah. Any other debate from any other councillors?
Chairman, I can confirm I've got no other hands raised.
Thank you, Sammy. The recommendation is for approval. Have we got a proposer and a seconder, please?
Councillor Wainwright.
Well, I'll move the recommendation as it is. Basically, the mix as it is, and just to reiterate that 90% of the 9 are at affordable rent, in perpetuity.
Thank you. Have we a seconder for that as well, please?
Councillor Camden.
Okay, so we have a proposer, Councillor Wainwright, and a seconder, Councillor Camden.
Chairman, I just wanted to check that Councillor Camden didn't want to say anything, whether he was just wanting to second the recommendation.
Okay.
No, I just second that, Sammy. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay then, so we will now move to Sammy, and she will do the roll call. Over to you, Sammy.
Thank you, Chairman. So members, I will call your name. If you could just say for, against or abstain. Councillor Annison.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Camden.
For.
Councillor Carpenter.
For.
Councillor Fairhead.
For.
Councillor Freeman.
For.
Councillor Flaxman-Taylor.
For.
Councillor Mogford.
For.
Thank you. Councillor Myers.
For.
Councillor Wainwright.
For.
Councillor Williamson.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Thank you. Could I just ask members to mute because we can hear some telephone in the background? Thank you. Chairman, I can advise that that was unanimous for the recommendation.
Thank you, Sammy. So that's approved. Thank you. We now move to item number 5. Before we start this application, I just want to confirm regarding the interest. the interest of item number 5, Paul Hammond is a borough councillor and is connected to the application. And this application was reported to the monitoring officer as an application submitted by a company in which a member is a director shareholder in the applicant company. The monitoring officer has checked and made a record on file that she is satisfied that it has been processed normally, and the member has taken note in the council's processing of this application. So we will now move to that application, which is West Road, West Caister, pages 27 to 43. And I'll now move across to Dean Minns.
Thank you, Chairman. The you said on page 27 there, we've got the setting out. It's the erection of a new 4-bedroom dwelling house at West End, West Caister there. The site itself, and you can see it outlined in red on the site, and I hope you can see it, which is this one here. It's approximately 0.25 hectares. And we had this an application by the applicant for a dwelling to the rear of the site back in, I believe it was in February, we actually had it and came before members. At that stage there, the application was at the back here. Now the application at that point was refused, and within the committee report, you can see the reason why it was sort of refused. But and so we've got a resubmission here now. The main impact really, the main reason for sort of refusing before was the actual design, its location, which is sort of on the fringes of the Broads Authority area there. And also because the applicant hadn't actually demonstrated that had no adverse impact upon, potentially sort of impact upon voles actually sort of in the area here as well. Now they look sort of usual, and with the ecological report, which now sort of takes into account an assessment of whether or not there's actually voles in the locality there. And the report sort of comes back to say that there's potential for voles in the wider locality, sort of in close proximity to this sort of to this application site here. Now there's a ditch that runs down the side here. There's also a ditch and watercourse that runs around the back here, which you can see at this point here. And the main concern at that stage by the county ecologists was that the voles were actually in this area here, and actually sort of water coming out of a discharge point from the from this development, which and utilising the existing sort of plant that you actually have on the site serving sort of westerly there, would actually come down here, go into the watercourse, and then link into this one here. Now, the ecological report has come back, and as I said, to say that there is the potential to sort of water bowls around the wider area, but the actual sort of habitat down here, and basically this is a dry ditch there, which in sort of winter time does get water into it, but it really acts as more of a soak away than rather than actually sort of linking into the wider ditch system. Now, I have actually been down there myself and looked at this, and there is no actual connection between this ditch that runs down the side here and this wider ditch at the back here and the drain that runs into the system there. For voles from that point of view. So we're now satisfied that that matter has been addressed and that we're in a position to say that there is no adverse impact, certainly upon the voles there, and or potential adverse impact upon those voles. And also, whilst I'm on the habitat side of things, again, the applicant has actually filled in one of our sort of habitat sort of mitigation forms there, and we're now satisfied that subject to that sort of, there's no direct impact linked with this particular property itself, but there is cumulatively, as you've heard us say so many times before, with the wider sort of development dwellings in the Great Falmouth area. Geez, they're juggling up there. Just moving along here, this is an aerial photograph, and you'll recall that when we before, so say the site that we were looking at, just shaded in here is where the Broads Authority area was, and they then sort of raised sort of objection to the proximity of that to the footpaths around there and to the Broads Authority. No objection has been received from the Broads Authority to this proposal, and as you can see, it's moved away from there. And as I move on to the site and the next slide, you'll then see how it sits in conjunction with the current application on the site, or adjacent to the site. There's a stable block in here. And then also we've then got this new house sort of built in here, which is a replacement for an existing dwelling. We've also approved recently around the area, other sort of one or two dwellings around this area here. And I believe there's a new dwelling in this area here as well. You can also see that this is a fairly sort of built up sort of within the sort of the sort of hamlet, if you like. We've got other sort of properties around here, and then potentially then by bringing this site forward from over there, where it's sort of in the open countryside, this could then be considered as an infill development there, as part of this sort of wider sort of development area. And this is the site as it is now. So we've got that stable block that I sort of showed there. There's the existing property as well. Sort of this one sits in between those. The property itself is still the same design as previously there, but having it sort of on this angle as well, and its relationship to the street scene sort of it's not such a, it doesn't appear quite as bulky and as a sort of standalone as it did down at this point here. So you've still got this sort of triple garage on the side, and then this is a 4-bedroom property running in there. The access to the site is off the existing access as well. So that sort of goes in there, then sort of runs round to this point. And this is the scale of the development proposed. 4-bedroom property, treble garage on the side there. And this is the accommodation inside it. Again, exactly the same as before. And so the property would be off to the right-hand side in here. Stable block over here. And there's the existing sort of application or property on the site. So in terms of scale, that's in sort of this new proposal is actually in keeping with the scale of that property there. I'm just running through again, so it's actually then be tucked away behind these walls, and still retaining that view through to the open land at the rear there. That's the end of the slide showing there. So from, as I understood it from looking at the previous minutes, really the main issue more than the actual design of the property itself really was the impact upon the wildlife and the voles down there, which they hadn't demonstrated had been satisfactorily addressed, and also that intrusion into the open countryside. I've just one sort of amendment that also has come into the update to the committee report there. There's a comment come in from sort of case to Parish Council as well, and there's no objection to the proposal. So as it now stands, it's recommended for approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Dean. Is there any technical questions from any councillors, please?
Chairman, I can confirm I have no hands raised.
Thank you, Sammy. I now invite if there's any agents to speak on this application.
Chairman, I can advise there's no agents or applicants wishing to speak on this matter.
Thank you. And I now invite any objectors or interested parties to speak.
Chairman, I can confirm there is no persons wishing to speak on this matter.
And I invite any parish council representatives or ward councillors.
Chairman, again, I can confirm I have no persons wishing to speak on the matter.
Thank you, Sammy. So we just move to the debate and what the councillors think of this application. Over to you.
Chairman, I can confirm I have no hands raised.
Thank you very much. So the application is recommended for approval. Do we have a proposer and a seconder, please?
Councillor Williamson.
I'm happy to propose this. The issues have been addressed since the last application was made. I'm happy to propose the recommendation as stated on the documents.
Thank you. Have we also a seconder, please?
I have Councillor Flaxman-Taylor.
Thank you, Chair. I'm happy to second this application.
Okay, thank you. So we move across again to Sammy, and Sammy will do the roll call again. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. So again, I will call you by your name. If you could say for, against or abstain. Councillor Annison.
For.
Councillor Bird.
For.
Councillor Candon.
For.
Councillor Carpenter.
For.
Councillor Fairhead.
For.
Councillor Freeman.
For.
Councillor Flaxman-Taylor.
For.
Councillor Mogford.
For.
Councillor Myers.
For.
Councillor Wainwright.
For.
Councillor Williamson.
For.
Councillor Wright.
For.
Chairman, I can confirm that is approved.
Thank you, Sammy. So we now move to item number 6, which are the delegate decisions between the 1st of April 2020 and the 30th of April, pages 44 to 50. And members are asked to note these decisions. Number 7.
Chairman, sorry, if I just need to make sure that no members have any objections to the delegated decisions, and then these can be taken on assent if we have no objections. Chairman, I can confirm I have no hands raised, so these are confirmed. Thank you.
Thank you, Sammy. So we move on to item number 7, which is the Ombudsman and Appeal decisions. If Dean could just give us some info regarding that one on there, please.
Wellesley Road, which was the
You weren't unmuted straight away. Just repeat that.
Sorry?
Just start again.
Okay, can you hear me now?
Yep.
There's 110 to 111 Wellesley Road there. This was the development that proposed as a retrospective permission for a change of use of guest house to 13-bed HMO with alterations to form kitchen, dining rooms for tenants there. Basically, we refused it. This is a couple of times now we've actually sort of refused this application there. It's gone to appeal. And the main issue there really was about the living conditions of the occupants of the appeal site and in respect of internal space, and 2, the living conditions of occupiers of properties in the surrounding areas in terms of general disturbance there. And really it was sort of really hung on the back of the fact that internal space was of a poor quality in there, and because the applicant didn't actually sort of address the issues from their previous appeal in terms of some accommodation and communal areas in there. So again, and even more so this time, the inspector actually sort of came down heavily on that aspect and saying that really this hadn't been addressed in there. In terms of the actual sort of impact upon the wider area there, it wasn't convinced that there'd be any sort of real sort of harm to sort of living conditions of surrounding residential properties. So really, it's all about sort of the internal accommodation of the dwelling or the site itself there. If anybody's got any questions about that, but, we'll do a bit sort of bring that back later as a sort of more of a sort of a learning sort of curve, I think, as well, when we sort of go through some of these at a later date. I've also got another one which is not part of the agenda there as well, which I think members will be sort of interested in, which is Oak Tree Cottage at Mill Road in Borough Castle. And if you recall this was sort of an application for 4 starter homes with garages and sort of access via a private courtyard from Mill Road. And again, this is one that sort of will bring up at, I think it'd probably be relevant at sort of at future committees as well there, because this is this question again about building out sort of site development boundaries. And in this area, it actually sort of saying, and bearing in mind, of course, that also this was a recommendation of approval by the officers, and members sort of refused the application because they're concerned about the impact upon the trees on the site, and also because there was no sort of footpath linked back to the main village there. And the inspector agreed with those on 2 accounts. He certainly agreed that there'd be an adverse impact upon the trees on the site, and also that the lack of footpath linkage back to the village, and this is actually abutting the village there as well, would be an issue for them in terms of sort of not being a sort of particularly sort of sustainable location for it. But as I say, again, we'll bring that one up sort of in a bit more detail later at the next sort of planning committee there. Thank you, Chairman.
Thanks, Dean. Is there any questions for Dean regarding any of that?
Chairman, I can confirm there are no questions.
Thank you, Sammy. So we move to item number 8. I understand Councillor Williamson has got a question we just wish to bring up with the planning manager. Councillor Williamson first, please.
Yes, thanks very much indeed, Chairman. I have spoken to Dean before concerning this. It's concerning an application which has just been passed on the 19th, but construction, it passed on the 19th of May, construction started in the last week of February. The building is almost complete now, and my worry is that I contacted Dean and we thought it was possibly a permitted development, etc. I also contacted Grant Scott, and he informed me that it had been inspected, but the plans weren't put in until the 24th of March. And so the building had been taking place nearly a month before the plans were put in. And as I said, it was approved. There's nothing wrong with the building and approving it. It's fine. It's an excellent extension, etc. But the problem is it was taking place outside the planning process. And so I just wondered what, conditions can be put in place to make sure that we can act upon this quickly, so people do not start building before the planning application has gone through the due process. And one of the conditions on the planning was actually to build in the same materials. Well, it hasn't been built in the same materials. And today, I think they've taken action trying to paint the house the same colour. So it's really concerning me that if this happens with one property, and another property close to me, the person has been waiting a long time to get all the permissions to start building. And it just seems an unfairness. So I just wondered what we could do as councillors, and I reported this as I was a member of the Development Control Committee, how we can take action to actually stop this happening. I can give you the reference number for the planning application if you wish.
No, I'm familiar with it. I did look this up again because obviously we had a letter of sort of representation about it as well there, and primarily what really required permission more than anything else was actually the double garage. So the other one, when I talked about sort of the permitted development side of things in terms of side extension, when I've been the rear extension, that was actually within the scope of that. Now, what they've actually done, so the double garage hasn't been built, and certainly it hadn't been built when I came past the site. You could put me right about that, but So the garage itself hadn't commenced, and building control had been looking at it. But generally speaking, it's not an offence in law to actually to start a development without actually getting sort of your planning permission. But if you do so, then obviously it's at your own risk. Now, where there is sort of, it's in the public interest that we should actually take action on that, then we do so, because particularly, and we are in a position where we can actually sort of issue a temporary stop notice or a stop notice, but it's a matter of for judgment really of whether or not we actually then should issue any such notice. And there is sort of potentially grounds for sort of compensation on that if it's done in the right manner. So it is a question of horses for courses, but certainly we don't endorse people starting development without getting their planning permission in the first place.
Okay, Councillor Williamson, yeah.
Yes, I understand that it wasn't a permitted development. They did a full planning application on the 24th of March for everything together. I understand where Dean's coming from, but the position is it's also got a very large, there could be further development taking place without any oversight. And it's just in rural areas where it can't be seen. It can't be seen from the road, for example. These things can happen. It's just amazing to me that person can develop and not follow the recommendations, which are now according to the approval. It just seems strange to me, that's all.
Yeah, no. 9 times out of 10, when it's drawn to our attention, then we look into it there. But I think there's certainly.
I've got nothing against the building at all, Dean, at all. That's not the principle. I'm just talking about the governance of the planning process.
Yeah, I appreciate that. I'll talk to you about that sort of later as well.
Okay. Is there any other business from anybody else they wish to raise? Dean? Yeah.
Neglected to mention at the beginning when we were talking about the minutes from the previous committee there, and we had the application for Stave Road on there, which was 2 applications. One was for the residential development of the side off Stave Road. The other one was also an associated junction with that as well, a new highways junction. Now, at that committee, we then sort of members sort of resolved to have a site visit there to go and sort of see the potential impact of the development, and also to review the highway and traffic situation. If you recall, it was sort of in fairly close proximity to Flegborough High School there, and there was sort of local concern raised about that. Obviously, with the where we stand at the moment with sort of COVID-19 and what have you there, then obviously we're not going ahead with sort of committee site visits per se, and obviously this application is still sitting on our books, and we need to actually sort of resolve the matter one way or another, either approve the application or refuse the application. So I'm proposing really that we actually bring this back to the next planning committee, again with the full report, and notify neighbours around the area of the intention to bring the application back to the committee without the site visit taking place. Because otherwise, if we're going to wait for the schools to go back, we don't know how long that's going to be. You know, maybe September, maybe June, but whatever happens, we're not going to see it sort of the school working at its sort of optimal sort of level, if you like, in terms of highway movements there. So that's my suggestion, that we bring it back at the next committee for discussion by members.
Okay, Dean, thanks. Would everybody be happy to bring that back to the next committee?
Chairman, we have Councillor Wainwright that would like to speak.
No, I didn't want to speak on that. I wanted to say something else, but I'm quite happy for we come back. Yeah. Hello?
I'm happy to take that on assent. If any member has any objection, if they could raise their hand, and we will address those first. Chairman, I can confirm no members have raised their hands, so we will take that as assent that it can be brought back to the next committee. Thank you.
Okay then. Do you wish to say something, Trevor?
Yeah, could I just say, Carl, for the minutes, perhaps we could include our thanks to Sammy in putting this together. I mean, it
Yeah.
is the first meeting of the DC, and I mean, it's gone extremely well. Everybody managed to get on. We had a few problems with the PNR meeting on Tuesday, but obviously that was well run. So just for the minutes, because it is a completely new way of working, and I think she should be congratulated for bringing it all together.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Thank you. I really appreciate that.
Well done, Sammy.
Yes, before we go, yes, I'd like to thank Sammy Wentle, Dean Minns, all the IT team at Great Yarmouth Borough Council, all the councillors for their patience. This is new to all of us. I'd just like to wish, thanks very much for your patience, and I'd close the meeting at 17:25.
Thanks, Chairman. If I can ask members just to stay on until I tell you that the live stream.
Was that?
Can't hear you, Sammy.
You're
on mute.
You're muted, Sammy.
Sorry, if members could just stay on while I stop the live stream, I will let you know when it's stopped. I will now stop it, but if you could just stay on until such time I tell you it's not being live streamed.